say for the sake of this demo, I want to install the Carbon package. So first I'm going to make sure that, I'm going to check to see if I already have it. Not. So then I'm going to use the find PS resource command, and I'm going to give it the name Carbon and the repository PS gallery, and we also have tab completion for the repository. Then I'm going to pipe it to install PS resource. So this will all just happen in one step now. So basically the object, the PS resource info object returned from find PS resource will just be piped install PS resource. And then if I do get installed PS resource -name Carbon, and I pipe that, well, let me set this or save this to a variable. And if I pipe that to FL star, yeah, so these are the properties of the PS resource info object. So we can easily access that information. And let's say I wanted to know more about its includes property. So I could just do includes. And then if it had commandlets, or sorry, if it had commands, then I could basically access that pretty easily just by doing .commands or .command on top of this. And then we can also check the type of the object returned from get install PS resource, and we see that's going to be a PS resource info object. Previously this was just a PS custom object. So now with this latest pre-release, all the -PS resource commandlets are going to return PS resource info objects, and or if you, for some you may have to specify pass-through if it's not expected for it to return an object, but you want to see it. And then for our PS resource repository commandlets, so for example, get PS resource repository, let's say I save that to different variable, and tab complete. Let's say I want to find information about this one, and then if I do type, so we can see that this is going to return a PS repository info object. So all our -PS resource repository commandlets are going to be returning these ones when it's appropriate. And the goal of this is just to have better support for piping, and also for the user, it's just going to be more clear what the commandlets are returning. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that.
I think Keith Hill had a question on whether or not the number of downloads is included in the metadata.
That is a good question. One second. I don't believe it is.
Yeah, I don't think it probably should be. I think it makes sense to have a separate discussion, and maybe it's outside of PowerShell Get v3 itself, and maybe it's something else to help module authors with getting data about their modules.
Yeah.
I think that's a good discussion, and we can have that discussion on the PowerShell Get repo. But it seems like that might be a separate module because the end users probably don't care about that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, I think so. I think for trust, we should probably look at a different type of reputation system instead of downloads, because automation might be downloading something that is not reputable.
And then to answer Gilbert's question, this wouldn't require modifying our repos in any way, correct? And that is correct. So you won't have to, this is all information that was just present in the Nepkig package anyways. So we're just getting that information from the package and just displaying it in a way I think that's easier. So they shouldn't have to change the data that's present or the way the packages are stored or anything in the repository. And then the next question from Frederick, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, is not part of this update obviously, but where are we on support for file system path hosted repositories? So for file system path hosted repositories, We've ensured that this pre-release will work with relative paths, and also we've added better support for Linux paths. I don't know if you had a specific question towards that, but we could definitely discuss that some more.
Okay. So I think maybe Keith, if you want to take care of this, if you just maybe start a discussion, we have this GitHub discussion feature enabled on the PowerShell Git repo. Just start something there, and I think Amber and Unum and some other folks on our side might, we can brainstorm on what the requirements are so that we can figure out what the best solution is.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Andy, are you ready to give an update on VS Code extension?
Yeah, this one isn't too long. I'm going to see if I can just share my screen here and show everybody the awesome new changelog. Let's take a look. Cool, I think that came through. So we've been hard at work with a lot of releases, I think, since the last community call. We're currently in 2021 9.1 preview. It has a couple regressions that I'm working on fixing, covering with tests. About 1 week ago, we did the September, like the first September stable release. This was a rather big one, actually, mostly because it included the update to PowerShell Script Analyzer to v1.20, and that seems to have solved a lot of people's problems, which is great. I always love just being able to pull in other people's great work and have it benefit even more people. So that was awesome. One of the other things that we have fixed in this release is maybe one of the first kind of features added, but it was more of a make things work a little more as people expected. If you are in VS Code and you use the PowerShell debugger, well, obviously there's the debugger through VS Code with buttons at the top, and there's also the PowerShell terminal with the debugger. And these two things are the same, or at least they communicate to each other. And in the past, before this release, if you had added PS breakpoints to the script that you are running and you run that in the terminal, it would totally start the debugger and tell VS Code, hey, the debugger's running and everything would look great. But when your code finished, it wouldn't know to tell the debugger to stop. So we actually plumbed that through, wired it up, and now the PowerShell integrated terminal, when it's done debugging, or if you've like manually said Q and quit the debug session from within there, it also takes down the VS Code debugger. So that's now working a lot better. We had several great fixes come in from community members. Thanks, Patrick, for getting stuff in there, and Michael for a good documentation fix. And I think, honestly, we even had a stable release between the last community call and now. A few previews. We did have a second August release. This was just a big debugger bug that was introduced mostly in OmniSharp. I think, now that I'm remembering, I think we did talk about this in the last community call. It is fixed. It continues to be fixed, which is great. Honestly, since we have finished the CI/CD project, it's the one project on here with the full green bar, we've been able to just get releases out like this. It's super helpful. I can now make a fix or two, get that out in a preview, see if it works, which is fantastic. Thank you all for running the preview of the extension, and turn it right around into stable releases. And so now we're seeing releases almost on a weekly cadence. Not that I'm committing to anything, but certainly since it's so easy for me now, I find it great to just get these out to users. So I think that's about it. I guess all I would say is that we're still working on making things better. There's a couple bugs, mostly around PowerShell 5.1, that I'm trying to solve, kind of unfortunately due to assembly loading issues, which make it difficult. And Rob is hard at work in the, I would say, last stages of the editor services thread revamp work. It's currently going through code review. We have most of it hooked up. I'm not entirely sure when we'll get it in, but it feels very close and soon. And if you see the work, if you've been in the editor services code and you know what it's like today, and you see the changes that Rob has managed to make to it, it's beautiful. We actually only have like one way to call it into PowerShell instead of a dozen ways. It's fantastic. Rob, did you have anything you wanted to speak to for that? Or are you on the call?
I'm here. Where's my, there I am, hi. I mean, I don't have anything really much beyond that to say, other than that, obviously this work, that particular work's been a long time coming. Turns out it's quite difficult to implement a debugger with remoting capabilities for PowerShell, especially because there's only really 2 of them out there in the wild. yeah, I mean, at some point we had to go back to the drawing board on some things, and but it's looking really good, to be honest with you. And there are still sort of a few things that we need to sort out, because the last thing we want to do is introduce this into the VS Code extension and it come across as a series of regressions, even though the core features work better, because some of the more long tail debugging features don't work. So I'm trying to make sure that things work, pretty much as they do today within reason, before we make the shift over. But it's a big change. We're trying to do it as methodically and carefully as possible, but it's like definitely worthwhile. It's something that I think is going to improve a lot about how the extension works, and I think we're pretty close.
And alongside that, I would add that we're making a really concerted effort to get the tests that exist back online, and also add tests for every change that we make and bug that we fix, so that in the future, the bug doesn't show back up. We had the really unfortunate experience of some bugs that we thought we'd solved coming back. So nowadays, there are a plethora of tests. Not enough, actually, I should say, not enough, but we're adding them every single chance that we get. In fact, that was the code that I was just working on, is yet another test. So yeah, does anyone have questions, future of the code extension or anything?
Don't see anything now. We can, if it comes up later, I hope Andy will just stay on here, and then we can get through that when we get to the Q&A.
I will actually have to drop after this. I have an appointment.
Right.
I need to
Maybe
run
Rob can answer then, or I'll answer.
Can do.
Thanks.
All right, Jim, if you're there, you want to talk about PowerShell Standard Library? This was a question that came up.
Sure. PowerShell Standard Library, we're still working on getting it into the regular build of PowerShell. The plan is that it is part of every SDK release that we make. So when we do a build of PowerShell, we'll rebuild the standard library. Haven't got to it yet, but that's the plan.
Yep. I think that's probably, let me reshare my screen. All right. Yeah, I think the key thing is it was a maintenance nightmare to keep updating it manually. So Jim has done some work. He's been focusing on some other stuff right now, but the idea is that we want to have it integrated so that we will co-publish with PS7 future releases. All right, so let me just give now a quick demo on this side project I've been working on. So let me share a different window. Let's see. Where is it? This one, I think. Wait, what is being shared? Hold on. All right. All right, hold on, I'm trying to rearrange some different windows here. Okay, so I will make the font a little bit bigger. But I need to make this window a little bit smaller for me. Okay, is that pretty good? Someone gives me a thumbs up.
Looks good to me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me, because I know Ilya also has some questions about why I'm even spending time on this. So let me start with the whys first, and then I'll go through what it is. So one of the big problems, or one of the feedback we've gotten from the existing, how PowerShell itself handles working with the file system is that it's not snappy, right? Let's ignore some of the other issues that we have. I'll get to why I'm doing this to resolve some of those issues as well. And so one of the reasons for that is the file system provider sits under the provider subsystem, which sits under all those commandlets like get child item and all these things. And that has a lot of complexity. So that by default will introduce some perf impact. The other thing is that there's a lot of complexity because the original code base for the file system provider was written for Windows, and it does a ton of p invokes. It's called native Win32 APIs because at the time it was written way back when the .NET equivalents were not that fast. And we kind of inherited that when we kind of forked it for PowerShell Core 6 and onwards. And then we added a whole bunch of if-defs and other side-by-side code to make it work on Unix, where we can call just native APIs, not native, call .NET APIs with some native API call for specific reasons. So what I wanted to kind of experiment with, and my goal is to try to make this published as a preview to the gallery this month, along with the repo being public. This is an experiment, so this doesn't mean that we or I will, support this. I have no intent to bring this to production quality. But what I want to learn from this is, what is the state of the .NET APIs? What can we rely on so that ideally we don't have any native p invokes in our code, so we just rely solely on .NET APIs? That'd be the ideal case. So where we have gaps, I want to find those, and then basically open those as issues in a .NET runtime repo and work with them to get those resolved, so that from our purpose, from our code, we don't need to worry necessarily about Unix versus Windows as one thing. The other thing is, I want to maybe take this opportunity, because this is a separate module. One of the principles we want to try to do is, if we can do experiments outside of PowerShell itself on the gallery, then we should try to do that. And I'm trying to follow that principle myself. And so in this case, I want to see if we can address some of the usability problems that were inherited from a long time ago that we can't really change because they're now app compat problems, because scripts might rely on it. So one of the examples is, if you use a wildcard in the path and you use, I think, like recurse, and you use include exclude filtering, then it doesn't do what you think it's going to do. So in this case, I'm not supporting some of those things. So let me get to the quick demo here. So I have right now 5 commandlets. To get directory content, it's pretty easy. It's just the same as get child item, basically. And I'm actually going to run this other commandlet first, enable alias. So this will basically clobber dir and I forget what it is now. It's going to be at least, okay, I forget now, but I'll check later. But anyways, I can now do dir, and if I do get command dir, this is actually pointing to get directory content instead of get child item. So let me just do a quick test, and I need to go into I'll just go here. So if I do measure, I'm going to do it from here. You'll see that, and this shouldn't take too long. This is actually pretty, in my opinion, substantially faster than get child item. So that was about 8 seconds. And then the classic way of doing it, it'll probably take about twice. Well, this time it wasn't that slow, but last time it was much faster. Let me move on. So my other commands I have, so copy. I'm going to skip copy for now. Some new stuff that I thought would be useful is get this usage. So this one is actually going recursively through all the directories and just spitting out how much is being used. So it's kind of like the equivalent of the du command, if you're familiar with that. And I also kind of bold anything that's in gigabytes, because it doesn't stand out. And then I think I also have a get disk. No, get disk. What did I call it? Oh, get drive info. Yeah. It's because the actual .NET. So this is just making a .NET call. They actually have an API to expose this already. Thanks, Jim, for letting me know about this. So it's very easy to write this commandlet wrapper. And again, I'm just doing some formatting for the gigabytes versus megabytes. And this will kind of get an easy way to get total size and available size on any drive. So I'll have to have a separate debate whether we should call it disk info or drive info, because the actual type is a drive info. All right, and the last one is really copy. So I think, again, I'll just do a quick copy directory. This one. All right, so this copy a whole bunch of stuff out of my downloads. And one thing you'll notice is that, oh, I didn't do the overwrite. Okay, hold on. Let me instead of doing that, let me go copy. Just delete this. What is it copying it to? I thought it was copy. Oh, test copy. All right. Copy. Why is there no copy here? Okay. Yes. All right. So again, one of the things you'll notice is that I actually got progress working for copy, whereas if you do copy item, you don't get progress. And this actually doesn't take up too much time because I'm only updating it when the folder changes. Again, this shouldn't take too long. I'm not gonna maybe necessarily run through actual copy item. In fact, I probably won't run through this whole thing. I didn't realize I had so much more stuff on the file system now. But anyways, it's actually substantially faster, but it's not complete. Like I know that when I test on Windows, OneDrive doesn't work because of the whole reparse point complexity, which is something I want to investigate and then get .NET APIs to support that. So let me see some immediate questions. I'm going to start from the bottom. So Blue, yes. Sorting, we can definitely sort based on size right now. It's just outputting it as the items come from the .NET API. And yes, the command line works on Windows. Okay, I think that's probably all I see in terms of questions on this. Yeah, so on Windows, you can do get volume, but get volume obviously doesn't exist on Unix. And one of the goals here is to make it cross-platform. The same commands work the same way. So anyways, again, this is a side project, so I'm not spending significant time on this. It's really just on weekends and evenings. But I do want to kind of get it out there to kind of get some initial feedback. So the question is, if this experiment is successful, is part of File System Provider v2? I think that the code itself would not be. The way I'm thinking about it now is that we'll probably try to make enhancements to the existing File System Provider v1 where it makes sense. One of the things I worry about, because I touch that code sometimes to fix bugs, and I know Eli does as well some others, but it's very fragile. So whenever we make a change that we think fixes something, something else ends up being broken, then we have to make another fix and not worry about whether that's going to cause a different regression, which is why I don't want to do a lot of these changes in the current code base. Now, we talked about in the past within the committee the concept of a File System Provider v2, and we still have to figure out how that's going to work, like because we need to keep the v1 for backwards compatibility, like do people register different providers and stuff like that. So that's one option. Another option I actually want to explore in the future is, and maybe this is I don't know when this will happen, like I also want to see if we can simplify the provider subsystem, make it easier to write providers. But also like maybe we just have the provider subsystem be more aware, because my hypothesis is that most of the time users are working with the file system, not other providers. So if that's the case, then we optimize for the file system in the provider subsystem layer, and then we fall back to the current model when it's some other provider. So that's something we may want to explore in the future. All right. Any other questions on this? All right, so let's move on. So the last item we have is a team update, and I know Joey, you're on the call.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Thank you, Steve, very much. Lots and lots of interesting stuff coming out here. Very, very excited. I wanted to provide a quick update to everyone because this, typically comes up in the community. We don't have the conference circuit to be able to have this conversation. But sadly, I am leaving Microsoft. So I wanted to come on here and just make sure that everybody in the community knew that I am extremely bullish on PowerShell. This was a very, very difficult personal decision for me to go on and try something new. I'm going off to a startup. I'll share some more details out on Twitter at some point here. But Steve and the team at Microsoft is crushing it right now. I mean, it was a really difficult decision. It was not something that it's very hard for me to move on from kind of my PowerShell family. But I'm still going to be out there in the ecosystem. I'm still going to be shilling PowerShell everywhere I possibly can, and I'm going to miss you all very, very much. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My DMs are kind of open. I think I've got the pending thing, but I'll be going through there, checking those out over the next couple of days. Yeah, I mean, Microsoft is also, just to reiterate, like zero with Microsoft here. To be honest, we've had some of the highest funding for PowerShell that we've had in a long time, and that seems to be growing. PM team is all fantastic. The engineers here are cranking on some massive initiatives. So it's really an exciting time for PowerShell. It's just coming up on 7 years for me, and it was it's fairly early in my career still, hopefully. So I want to try something new and check out a new company. But I just wanted to thank everyone in the community for an amazing time, and that I hope to see you all out there in the ecosystem and on GitHub, and yeah, drop me a line.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. It's been a great adventure, on this open source cross-platform PowerShell 7, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Steve.
All right, so let's move on to Q&A. So let me just switch my other screen over to see if there's anything new that came up on the GitHub side that we didn't cover. So PowerShell standard library. Okay, so I think we kind of covered that. I think there's some questions about whether the documentation is up to date. Sean, are you on this call?
I'm here.
Okay. No, there's no action for you, but I think maybe it's something we need to just review with Jim to see if we need to rev those docs or not.
Docs for which? I'm sorry.
Or using PowerShell standard library to write a compatible module across Windows PowerShell and PowerShell 7. This is if you take a look at the RFC repo for the issue for this call, you'll see as the first response.
Okay.
I'll follow with you offline.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll drop links to the existing articles that people should be referring to, and you can let me know if there's anything that needs to be updated.
Let's take a quick note here. You can, by the way, if you see like this is a gray text, this is Copilot. So that's sometimes it produces weird stuff, but in this case, I think it's fine. I'll just say YouTube follow up with Sean. All right. The next question is, will there be PowerShell support in GitHub code spaces? As far as I recall, the last time I tested code spaces, I thought the PowerShell extension was already there.
So it does work. I think the question may be around like the github.dev, the web-based editor, which is pretty unlikely.
Yeah, that unless they switch over to the new code, it's probably unlikely. If that's the question. I don't know if Zia Bytes is on the call and can elaborate. What the heck? Get out of there. So I'll just put in here at least some. All right, let me keep moving on. Chrissy says, the last week I went on vacation. Talk about the VS Code extension. Okay, so I think we already covered that topic. Okay, Andy replied. Elio was asking about the file utility. I think I addressed that. Kirsten Grody. Oh, so is this a demo? Okay, so we can maybe do that after we finish Q&A. And then Elia is asking about the dashboard. Yes. It's not updated last month. Is that true? Let me just double check the dashboard real quick. I'm not aware of. So let me just put a demo. Okay, so the question looks like the last update was okay. So it looks like it stopped mid-August. All right, so I will follow up on that. Let's So it looks like it's. I think. Okay, so there were two parts. Yeah, so I wasn't aware that the dashboard had stopped updating. I can tell that August was actually really big, and we don't know exactly. So let me bring up the dashboard real quick. So you can talk to this. It's probably easier to do that. So let me stop sharing the notes. Let me share this guy. All right, so you should see the dashboard here. So there has been like significant increase. All the blue is Windows, and all this orange down here. And in fact, I can probably do. Is this going to do what I want? It's not what I want. I don't want the filter. Stop it. All right, it's not letting me just enlarge this one, but so you can see like since somewhere in July, towards the end of July, there was a significant increase on Windows usage of PowerShell 7. These are sessions. And of course, Linux is still kind of flat, so it's still consistent. We don't, because we don't have any PII, meaning privately or what's it, privately identified information. We can't really. Oh, personally identified information. We can't really. We've been looking at this because we had the same question ourselves, like what is driving this growth? We looked at different things, and we don't have an answer at this point of what it is. We've been trying to also figure out, is this within Azure or not? And that's also been difficult because we don't have the data needed to kind of correlate across that. So we're going to still continue to look at some of this. We've been talking to other teams like Azure PowerShell to see if there's some correlation between our growth and their growth usage. But we'll continue to look into this because it's also important for us. That's one of the reasons we have the telemetry to figure out, what's happening, what's people using it for, so we can kind of focus potentially new investments into those areas that are being heavily used. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer. I'll share something once we have something more definitive. But definitely, even though we're not inboxed in Windows, there has been really a significant increase in usage, and the September data has continued to climb. So let's see. Okay. Okay, I think some other discussion. I'm just going to skip unless there's something I need to address. Looks like Justin's been answering a bunch of questions. Good, thank you. All right, I think we can then go on to Justin's demo. Do you have screen share permission already? Otherwise, I can give it to you.
Not at the moment. You're gonna have to promote me. Thanks, Steve.
All right, let me find you here. Hold on. This guy. All right. All right, you should have presenter now.
All right, that should be up and visible, my VS Code there. Sorry.
Yep.
A little bit to make it a little easier. All right, so today I'm going to be demoing a little project that I've been working on. This is a test runner for Pester using Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code came out with this new testing API that made it basically able to run tests built directly into VS Code, sort of built off some stuff that Tyler used to do, but they made it native. So I basically use this both as an opportunity to add something to VS Code to run Pester tests, as well as basically learn TypeScript from scratch. So I'm just going to show a quick demo of this. So when you come here, this is just sort of a default here, and I got a few kind of basic tests, things like true, false, should be true, just some example tests like you would normally run. And so if you go over to here, you'll have a new test explorer that comes up. Now I have it in my debug window, but you can drag this thing around. You can put it in your terminal. You can have it as a separate sidebar thing. You can move it around like any other items. But you'll notice it came up real fast. So automatically it discovers Pester tests that exist in the environment. You can customize, like if you like to have your test files have different names, you can customize like that. Basically, it discovers these, and as I go to each one, it's going to be able to go through and discover all the tests that exist in that file. So here, basic, there's the basic, here succeeds, there's succeeds, it all lines up, and you'll notice these little green arrows have shown up next to each test. One really nice thing here too is that it also can discover test cases. So if you've set up a test case and you have 1, 2, red, blue, it automatically breaks them out into 1, 2, red, blue. And in fact, if you go to the arrow here, you can see those test case here, and you can run them, debug them, etc. Each one of these, if you want to go to the test directly, you can just click this icon and it'll take it right to that. And then we can go ahead and start running some tests. So let's start with this one that should just be true. So we run that. That actually ran in debug mode, but if I also just choose run test, it'll run there. And if I click run here, and you'll see it's pretty quick. If it's not running in debug mode, you know, it's coming back real fast. And I use a special custom runner that I made for Node.js, which I won't go into too much, but basically I made a really fast way to interact with Pester that allows this kind of thing to happen. The other nice thing too is that I've enabled it so that now that it's really fast, you can make it so that as you make changes to your tests and save them, it can automatically rerun your tests and see if they work. So if I take a test that is, you know, true should be true, if I make it true should be false, the second I click save, I can find out, oh, I broke my test. And if you're making those changes in other code, that's going to be available here too. So you get this nice little kind of message here. This is all customizable. Typically, this is a lot brighter red. I make it a little more muted so I don't have to see it. But if I go and click on this, I get a little bit more information. I get what was expected, what was actual, and the history of this test and the test run. So I can see, okay, this was working up to this point. And anytime in here, you can click this little icon and see what the Pester output was when it ran. So you can see there. In fact, you can see this output in real time too if you want to by clicking this little console here. Then that brings it up here. I'm just going to move this to the side and hide this just to show that. But here I am, and I can start running these tests and see the Pester output in real time there. If I want to debug a test, then bring this back down to the bottom. If I want to debug a test, I can take something here and go ahead and just put this on a new line for fun. And then throw a breakpoint in there. And then by clicking this icon, it runs debug by default. And it'll actually run the test in the terminal. It runs it using whatever version you're here. I automatically detect what PowerShell extension version you're using. And it runs using your level of verbosity that you've configured in VS Code. So this basically goes ahead and runs it in my diagnostic mode. But if you've set your PowerShell extension to be in normal mode, you won't see all the details. But you have it there, and you see it's hit the breakpoint, and I have all the things, typical debugging that you have, variables, etc. So if you set your breakpoint in the code that this is testing, that works too. And so there's that. And so also you can go ahead and run all the tests, and that'll go ahead and run them all, and you'll see it goes pretty quick, automatically updates as they go. But that was all my tests completed there in a very short amount of time. If you have syntax errors, it will see them. So if I go to this guy, you'll see it knows that this file had this -- or in it. And if you, for instance, go to a file like this one and see that I have a syntax error, where if I hover over this for a second, it'll show, missing a semicolon. So if I go through and fix that and save it, it'll detect that, rerun it, and fix it. If you add new tests, it works. And hit save, those new tests automatically show up. If you add new test files, they automatically will be detected and show up. So you have this really nice interface for running Pester tests as opposed to just doing invoke Pester over and over. It lets you in real time see what you're doing and gives you a lot easier interface for going through and testing these. So again, this is just a quick demo. I'm not going to go too much into like showing this with real tests and that kind of thing, but this is sort of a real nice interface. It's going to have tagging support. It's going to have coverage support so that if you change a test that has test coverage from this, it can rerun that test. And if you want to see more of this, as well as how the extension works under the hood, I'm going to put a YouTube link here at the bottom. That is a presentation I did at 4 in the morning this morning for PDCConf IN that kind of gives a little bit more detail. So I'll put that in the chat, but that's sort of the demo in a nutshell. The question from Keith is, Test Explorer standard view in VS Code? Yes. So for instance, let me open the actual code for this, the VS Code adapter. And you'll see here, I have multiple test providers. So the Jest team, which Jest is a sort of like a Pester for TypeScript, they provide a test adapter. And so all my tests that I have for the TypeScript side of things show up in the same view as Pester. And they all run and view and get viewed the same way. So this is basically like having a first-class citizen in Visual Studio Code, just like there will be for C# and Jest and etc. We will have one for Pester as well. And this is nice because, again, you don't have to relearn how to do a lot of things. Like when I started my TypeScript journey, learning how to do all this stuff, I have all these familiar tools. I'm so used to I can use the same tools that I use to run and debug TypeScript that I use to run and debug PowerShell. And so I don't have to learn Visual Studio, or I have to learn JetBrains or some other tool to have what's called a polyglot program that runs both PowerShell and TypeScript and whatever else might be involved. So that's part of the reason I had the impetus to make this Explorer, because I saw the power of it. I really wanted to make it so that people can utilize pester tests much more effectively than having to do invoke pester all the time, and be able to really just be able to, as you write your scripts, know the second you make a change if things work or they don't. So that's my demo. Thank you very much. And I'll put a link to a more in-depth presentation I did in the chat.
Awesome. This requires Pester 5, right?
This does require Pester 5 based on some plugins. It may be possible to make it work for Pester 4, but I'm not investing any energy in that. So yeah, so this won't work with Pester 4. It requires Pester 5.2, I think, and it'll let you know if you don't have the right version of Pester.
Very cool. All right, I think we are at the end. Let me just double check to make sure there's no other questions, or if anyone wants to raise a question now before we close, this would be the time to do it. All right, I see one question that just came in 5 minutes ago about semantic versioning. So we are still waiting on .NET to support that before we move ahead. We don't want to have a semver type only to be incompatible with any .NET semver type. So we're working with them to hopefully it's something they'll commit to doing in .NET 7. And if so, then we can do it for 7.3. All right, I think that's kind of the end of it. I will copy and put your video in the notes. Let's see. Otherwise, I think we are done for today. Where is... There we go. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Justin. And thank you, Joey.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully see y'all at the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.